A seemingly harmless, almost comical question such as why do you bite your nails conceals dimensions of the human psyche that reach far deeper than the gesture itself. At first glance it looks trivial, a minor expression of nervousness or boredom. A hand lifts unconsciously toward the mouth, teeth nibble at the edges of the nail, and the cycle repeats. Yet millions of people around the world perform this act daily without ever pausing to ask what it means. Beneath its simplicity lies a map of unconscious mechanisms, hidden conflicts, and symbolic gestures that tell us more about the human condition than we might suspect. Carl Gustav Jung would insist that no behavior, however small, is meaningless. The unconscious often speaks through the body. If words are suppressed, movements become their substitute language. Nail biting is one of those silent messages from the depths of the psyche. To the surface observer it appears as nothing more than a habit. To the psychologist it is a ritual full of clues. It raises the question, does this behavior belong to the realm of conscious choice, or is it a coded communication from the unconscious? When viewed in this light, the question ceases to be trivial. It becomes a key that can open the door to inner understanding. Medical science names the act onychophagia and groups it under body-focused repetitive behaviors along with hair pulling or compulsive skin picking. Such habits often begin in childhood and adolescence and for many persist into adulthood. Epidemiological studies suggest that between 20 and 30% of adults bite their nails regularly, and the percentage is even higher among adolescents. At the neurological level, researchers connect these behaviors with the way the brain regulates stress and dopamine. When the teeth meet the nail, the brain reward system lights up. A small dose of dopamine brings momentary calm. The tension that was building in the nervous system fades away. But only for a moment. The relief does not last, and what follows is often guilt, shame, or even physical pain. Thus the body finds a temporary escape from inner stress, but at the cost of injuring itself. A paradox is revealed: the act that is meant to soothe in fact harms. Jung would add that nails themselves hold ancient symbolic weight. They are extensions of our survival instincts, like claws or weapons used in primal defense. To bite them away unconsciously is to dismantle our own natural protection. Symbolically, it is a gesture of disarming oneself, of signaling you are not prepared, not strong enough, not protected. It is a bodily confession of insecurity carried out without words. From this perspective, nail biting is not coincidental but a symbolic drama replayed on the stage of the body. The drama communicates that a person feels unready for the challenges of life. Philosophy has long searched for metaphors to describe the hidden side of human existence. Plato's allegory of the cave describes chained prisoners who see only shadows on the wall, mistaking them for reality. Nail biting can be read as a modern version of that myth. The shadows are our anxieties and fears. Instead of turning to confront them directly, the person chews at them silently, as if consuming them might make them disappear. Yet, as with the prisoners, the true light remains behind. The habit becomes a ritual confirmation of fear and avoidance. Rather than freedom, it preserves captivity. Modern psychology frames these repetitive actions as somatization. When emotions cannot be spoken, they find their exit through the body. A child who cannot express sadness or anger may scratch their skin or pull their hair. An adult who cannot admit to fear may gnaw their nails. The body becomes the arena where the inner conflict plays out. As a result, nail biting should not be dismissed as simply a bad habit. It is a form of unconscious communication between the soul and the flesh. If we listen closely, we hear the story of unprocessed feelings trying to find their way out. From Jungian depth psychology, the phenomenon represents the conflict between instinctual life and social expectation. Instinct demands release. Society demands composure. The conscious mind tries to silence the instinct, but the unconscious persists. The body acts as the bridge. The hand moves to the mouth, the teeth begin their work. Tension is discharged symbolically yet not resolved. Jung argued that repressed contents of the unconscious never vanish. They return disguised in symptoms, compulsions, and even illnesses. Nail biting then is not a sign of weakness but a message not yet deciphered. It is the unconscious knocking at the door of consciousness asking to be acknowledged. When seen this way, the person who bites their nails lives much like the prisoners in Plato cave. Their back is turned to the light of awareness. They stare instead at shadows flickering on the inner wall of their mind. Those shadows are insecurity, fear, restlessness. They do not face the true source but respond only to its reflection. Their ritual chewing becomes a way of staying chained in darkness while pretending to find relief. The tragedy is not the ruined nails but the wasted opportunity to turn around and see the light. Nietzsche viewed such behaviors through the concept of the will to power. To him, every life form strives not merely to survive but to expand, to grow, to overcome itself. Nail biting, however, reflects a misdirection of that energy. The will to power is turned inward and becomes self-destructive. Instead of conquering external challenges, the person gnaws away at their own defenses. Instead of creating, they consume themselves. Nietzsche would say that this is a symptom of a soul not yet on its true path. The person who has not yet dared to become what they are destined to be wastes creative energy in destructive rituals. Yet Nietzsche would also point to hope. Within every weakness lies the seed of transformation. The one who sees the futility of their self-harm and chooses another direction becomes stronger than the one who never struggled. To overcome nail biting could be more than a cosmetic victory. It could be a first act of self-overcoming. Kierkegaard approached human behavior through the lens of anxiety. He described anxiety as the dizziness of freedom. When we realize we are free to choose among infinite possibilities, we feel overwhelmed and insecure. To escape this dizziness, we often flee into rituals that seem to anchor us. Nail biting is precisely such an escape. The gesture reduces infinity to a small controllable act. Instead of facing the vast responsibility of freedom, the individual retreats into chewing. But Kierkegaard insisted that anxiety cannot be erased by avoidance. It must be faced, embraced, and understood. Only then does it become the teacher that leads to growth. In this light, nail biting is not only a nervous tic but a retreat from the responsibility of freedom. Jung spoke of individuation, the process by which a person becomes whole, uniting the conscious with the unconscious, reconciling the social mask with the inner truth. Habits such as nail biting reveal that this process is unfinished. They are signals that some part of the psyche remains excluded and unacknowledged. The bitten nails become the body whispering that there are feelings, unmet needs, or fears that wait for integration. Thus, each small gesture is not meaningless. It is a symbolic letter sent by the unconscious asking to be read. From a medical perspective, the consequences are not negligible. Nails protect the sensitive skin of fingers. Damaging them exposes entry points for bacteria and fungi. Chronic nail biters often suffer from infections, inflamed cuticles, and even systemic illness. Dentists observe that constant pressure from biting shifts teeth, damages enamel, and strains the jaw. Gastroenterologists warn that swallowed nail fragments may irritate the digestive tract. What appears to be a harmless private ritual creates real physical costs. The body keeps the score, as the psychologist Bessel van der Kolk famously put it. In the case of nail biting, the score is etched in damaged enamel, weakened immunity, and chronic tension. Neurological research has gone further, showing that nail biting activates circuits similar to those involved in obsessive-compulsive disorders. The act reduces stress for a moment but trains the brain to seek the same release repeatedly. The cycle deepens. Soon the body no longer remembers how to process emotions consciously. Instead, it reaches automatically for the nails. The lesson is clear. Repressed contents do not disappear. They find new outlets. The unconscious leads the hand to the mouth. Jung named this the shadow, the collection of all that we refuse to acknowledge about ourselves. Nail biting is a shadow made visible. It is a small fragment of inner darkness seeking light. When we explore further, we see that nail biting is more than an individual quirk. It is also a mirror of our culture. We live in an age where performance and productivity are praised above silence and introspection. Society rewards the mask and punishes honesty. We are taught to appear composed even when we are collapsing inside. In such an atmosphere, the unconscious will always find an outlet. If words are not allowed, wounds will speak. Nail biting becomes one of those private rebellions of the body against the tyranny of appearances. It says, I am not as calm as I look. It whispers the truth of inner unrest beneath the polished surface. The habit also shows the collective shadow of our civilization. Jung often wrote that what we do not integrate individually returns on the collective level. Individuals repress emotions and societies repress truths. Both return in disguised form. Just as the bitten nail is a symptom of unspoken fear, so the social crisis is a symptom of unacknowledged injustice. Nail biting may look like a personal issue, yet it reveals the logic of our age. Instead of confronting pain, we avoid it. Instead of dialogue, we distract ourselves. Instead of facing our insecurities, we chew them silently, hoping they disappear. The nail becomes the battlefield where modern man wages war against his own vulnerability. Kierkegaard described despair not only as screaming or visible collapse but also as a quiet abandonment of oneself. A person may walk through life apparently calm yet inwardly hollow. Nail biting is precisely this kind of silent despair. The ritual communicates that the individual is not at peace with themselves. Day after day the mouth consumes what the psyche cannot digest. Nietzsche, however, would see within this despair a potential for transformation. Weakness is not final. It can be used as raw material for growth. The one who notices their own destructive cycle and chooses to overcome it discovers strength deeper than that of the one who never faced struggle. Nail biting then is not only a sign of weakness but also a potential doorway. The key lies in whether the individual interprets it as fate or as a challenge to be transformed. Consider perfectionism. Many nail biters describe the urge to chew as beginning with a tiny imperfection in the nail. A small crack, a rough edge. The sight of imperfection triggers anxiety. Instead of accepting it, the person seeks to erase it by biting. Symbolically, this is an attempt to eliminate flaws not only in the nail but in the self. Yet perfection cannot be reached by erasure. Weakness does not vanish through destruction. It returns magnified. Nietzsche warned that the pursuit of unattainable ideals enslaves the soul. The more one focuses on what is lacking, the less one creates from strength. Nail biting becomes a metaphor for this trap. Instead of embracing imperfection, the individual nibbles away at themselves endlessly. Kierkegaard would describe this as despair rooted in fear of oneself. Modern humans constantly measure themselves by external standards. Social media amplifies the problem. We compare our inner chaos with the polished images of others. We scroll through shadows on screens and feel inadequate. The hand unconsciously moves to the mouth. The nail is sacrificed because it is the only thing we can control. We cannot change the world, but we can chew at ourselves. The ritual becomes a substitute for control in an uncontrollable environment. In truth, it is a ritual of despair, a silent admission that we cannot bear our own imperfection. Yet Jung reminds us that symptoms are not enemies. They are allies disguised in uncomfortable forms. If we learn to interpret them, they become guides. Nail biting can thus be seen as a message from the unconscious, a small alarm bell signaling that emotions remain unprocessed. It is a symbol saying, slow down, look within, face what you are avoiding. The habit is painful, yes, but it is also meaningful. If we ignore it, we prolong suffering. If we read it, we may begin a journey of self-discovery. This is the essence of Jung's approach, turning symptoms into symbols. The moment a person understands their habit as communication, they have already taken the first step toward healing. From the medical perspective, the stakes are also serious. Chronic nail biting maintains the body in a state of heightened stress. Researchers have measured elevated cortisol levels in individuals who engage in constant micro-movements like chewing nails. Cortisol is the hormone of alertness. When it remains high over time, the immune system weakens, digestion suffers, and the nervous system loses balance. The body lives as if danger is ever present even when the environment is safe. The habit thus transforms daily life into a constant background of tension. This is why nail biting is not just cosmetic. It is a sign that the body never truly rests. Here again Jung language of the shadow applies. What we refuse to see within ourselves does not disappear. It relocates into the body. Sadness, anger, insecurity, if unspoken, take residence in our hands and jaws. Nails which symbolize defense are destroyed by their owner. The unconscious says you are disarming yourself because you fear who you are. To recognize this is to see the tragic logic of the unconscious. It prefers self-harm to silence. It will make itself known one way or another. Our task as psychologists is to help people translate these gestures into conscious insight. Nietzsche would argue that the will to power is here misdirected. Instead of overcoming obstacles, the energy is used to gnaw at the self. Creative force collapses into destructive repetition. Yet he would also emphasize that recognition is the beginning of transformation. When a person realizes I am destroying myself, they also realize I could redirect this energy. Nail biting becomes not only a problem but also an opportunity. It is a reminder that strength can be reshaped. Kierkegaard would reinforce this by pointing to anxiety. The dizziness of freedom terrifies us and we escape into rituals. But true courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to face fear directly. To stop biting one's nails is not just a matter of self-control. It is a decision to accept freedom, responsibility, and the anxiety that comes with them. Plato allegory helps again. To bite nails is to stay chained in the cave fighting with shadows. To stop and reflect is to turn toward the light. The shadows of fear remain until we confront them. The bitten nails become evidence that the prisoner has chosen to remain with shadows. Yet the possibility of liberation always exists. Turning to face the light means asking, what do these shadows represent? What emotion am I avoiding? What truth have I silenced? The transition from habit to insight is the transition from shadow to light. Jung called this process individuation. It begins when we take what torments us and treat it as a symbol. Nail biting ceases to be only a tick. It becomes a message. Each wound around the finger is a reminder that something within seeks attention. The true remedy then is not gloves, bitter polishes, or punishments. Those may interrupt the behavior, but they do not resolve the cause. The real healing comes when the person asks, what is my body trying to say? The moment they translate the symptom into meaning, the unconscious begins to integrate. This is the deeper work of psychology. At this point, a wider question opens. Why do so many in modern society lack the time and courage to process emotions? Why is it easier to gnaw in silence than to admit sadness or fear? Perhaps because ours is an era of masks. Success is measured in output, appearances, and performance. Vulnerability is hidden, punished, or mocked. In such an environment, the unconscious will always rebel. It will find ways to express itself through symptoms. Nail biting is one of the more benign examples. Others may be more severe addictions, depression, or psychosomatic illness. The common thread is the same. What is repressed returns. Nail biting thus becomes not only a personal signal but also a cultural symbol. It speaks of a civilization that has forgotten how to listen to inner life. Our schedules leave no space for silence. Our systems reward constant activity. The unconscious takes revenge by gnawing at us literally. Jung would call this the collective shadow, the truths a society refuses to acknowledge. Just as individuals repress feelings, so cultures repress weaknesses. But the shadow does not vanish. It returns in hidden rituals that undermine well-being. To understand the depth of nail biting, we must also look at the personal narratives that surround it. In clinical practice, one often hears the same confession spoken with a mixture of embarrassment and resignation. Patients say, I have been doing this since I was a child. I do it when I am stressed, but also when I am bored. Sometimes I do not even notice it until my fingers bleed. This confession reveals a fundamental truth. Nail biting is rarely fully conscious. It often slips beneath awareness, becoming almost automatic. The individual becomes both victim and participant in a cycle that seems beyond control. The automatic nature of the habit is what makes it so revealing psychologically. It shows how much of our life is guided not by deliberate choice but by unconscious mechanisms. The hand moves almost by itself, the teeth engage, the cycle repeats. Consciousness awakens only afterward when the damage is seen. This structure is similar to dreams, which also express hidden content without conscious control. Jung would suggest that nail biting is a waking dream, a small symbolic act carrying meaning that consciousness has refused to face. The difference is that instead of occurring at night, it happens in broad daylight. In some cases, the ritual is connected with perfectionism, as already noted. A person notices a small imperfection in the nail and feels compelled to correct it. In others, it arises from pure tension. The body seeks release when words cannot express the burden. In still others, it is linked with memory. A child who once chewed nails in moments of anxiety may carry the same reflex into adulthood long after the original cause has disappeared. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Each bite becomes an echo of an earlier struggle, repeated long after its necessity has passed. From the symbolic perspective, nails as weapons or claws remind us of our primal capacity for defense. In animals, claws are sharpened to prepare for survival. In humans, nails are chewed away as if survival itself were being undermined. The act therefore symbolizes inner disarmament. The person unconsciously removes their own protection. It is as though the psyche declares, "I am defenseless." In therapy, one can often trace this back to histories of insecurity or criticism. The individual internalized the feeling of being unprepared and now replays it symbolically with their own body. Each bite is a message saying, "You are not ready, you are not enough." Plato allegory again helps us see. The prisoners mistake shadows for reality because they never turn to face the source of light. Likewise, the nail biter mistakes the symptom for the solution. They believe that chewing will relieve tension. In reality, it only prolongs it. They remain chained by habit, just as the prisoners remain chained by ignorance. Liberation requires turning around. For the nail biter, this means pausing to ask, what is the shadow I am trying to consume? Is it fear of failure? Is it loneliness? Is it unspoken anger? Only by naming the shadow can the person step out of the cave. Kierkegaard's concept of anxiety as the dizziness of freedom resonates strongly here. To be human is to stand before infinite choices. That openness can feel unbearable. Instead of making bold decisions, people often retreat into rituals that reduce freedom to a small predictable act. Nail biting becomes a private refuge from the abyss of choice. Yet, as Kierkegaard emphasized, anxiety cannot be eliminated by avoidance. It must be faced. When we embrace anxiety, it transforms from enemy into guide. It tells us what matters most to us. The nail biter who dares to face their anxiety may discover that behind the habit lies a deeper longing, perhaps for security, perhaps for authenticity, perhaps for courage. Nietzsche would frame this in terms of will to power. Every act of self-destruction reveals energy turned inward against itself. The one who chews at their nails wastes strength that could have been directed outward creatively. Yet Nietzsche also believed that such weakness can be overcome and used as fuel. The very recognition of self-destruction can awaken the desire to redirect energy. The moment the individual says, "I do not want to waste myself anymore," they begin to rise above themselves. Nail biting then becomes the raw material for transformation. The energy that once destroyed can become the energy that builds. From the medical side, the evidence is equally strong. Dentists note the strain on enamel and jaw. Dermatologists note chronic infections. Psychologists note heightened cortisol and compulsive cycles. Gastroenterologists warn about swallowed fragments. Yet the deeper damage is psychological. Nail biting teaches the brain that the way to cope with emotion is through compulsion. This lesson is dangerous. It prevents the development of healthier tools for self-regulation. Instead of speaking, crying, or moving, the body learns to chew. The cycle perpetuates stress instead of resolving it. In therapy, the first step is awareness. Many patients are astonished when asked to notice exactly when the urge arises. They begin to see patterns. The urge comes before exams, during arguments, when alone at night. Each pattern reveals the hidden trigger. By naming the trigger, the unconscious becomes conscious. Jung often said that until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our lives and we will call it fate. Nail biting is such a fate until awareness interrupts it. Once awareness grows, the patient can ask, what emotion am I avoiding? What fear lies beneath this urge? Each question turns a symptom into a symbol. Another therapeutic path involves replacing the habit with healthier rituals. Deep breathing, squeezing a stress ball, journaling, short walks. These alternatives offer the nervous system another outlet for tension. The goal is not merely to stop biting, but to learn new ways of self-soothing that do not harm. Over time, the brain learns new associations. Stress arises, breathing calms. Anxiety arises, writing releases. Slowly, the old compulsion loses its power. Yet the most profound change comes not from substitution but from meaning. When the person understands that the bitten nail is a message from the soul, they no longer see the habit as shameful. They see it as a teacher. This shift in interpretation transforms their relationship with themselves. Nail biting is also linked with perfectionism in a more general cultural sense. We inhabit a society obsessed with flawless images. Social media bombards us with pictures of perfect bodies, perfect homes, perfect smiles. Against this backdrop, our imperfections feel unbearable. The rough edge of a nail becomes intolerable because it mirrors the rough edges of our lives. By biting, we attempt to erase imperfection. But we only magnify it. The ritual becomes a metaphor for the futility of perfectionism. Instead of acceptance, we engage in endless correction. Instead of growth, we gnaw at ourselves. Nietzsche would call this a form of slavery to an ideal. The ideal is never reached, yet always demanded. The more we strive, the more we feel lacking. Nail biting becomes a visible metaphor for this inner slavery. We are trapped in deficiency. Kierkegaard would call it despair. Not loud despair, but quiet resignation. We do not even ask what we truly want. We simply chew at ourselves in silence. The tragedy of modern humanity is not only that we suffer, but that we do so without naming it. Nail biting is the silent signature of that tragedy. Yet it can also be the starting point of transformation. When the patient finally asks, "Why do I bite my nails?" the question itself opens a door. They begin to see that the habit is not about nails at all. It is about how they deal with emotion, insecurity, and freedom. The nails are only the surface. Beneath them lies the whole drama of the human condition. By facing this, the individual can move toward individuation, the integration of shadow and light. Each small victory against the habit becomes a symbol of greater inner growth. The person who stops biting their nails has not only cleaner hands. They have begun to face themselves. When we step back and look at nail biting not only through the eyes of medicine but also through the wider lens of philosophy, we recognize it as a microcosm of the human struggle. The habit may appear trivial, but it carries within it the same dynamics that shape our greatest decisions. It embodies the tension between instinct and expectation, between freedom and fear, between the unconscious and the mask of society. In this way, it is not only a personal tic but a universal parable. Jung would insist that what we repress does not vanish. It returns disguised. In nail biting, we see the return of unspoken emotions. A child who could not express anger now bites as an adult. A teenager who felt inadequate chews during stress. An adult under pressure nibbles unconsciously during work meetings. The content of the shadow may vary, but the structure remains. The unconscious speaks through the body when the voice is silenced. Jung called the path of healing individuation. It is the journey of making the unconscious conscious, integrating the rejected parts of the self. Nail biting signals that this journey is unfinished. Yet the very recognition of the habit can mark the beginning of the path. Plato allegory remains strikingly relevant. Just as the prisoners mistake shadows for reality, the nail biter mistakes ritual for solution. They believe chewing relieves tension, but it only deepens the chain. To turn toward the light means to realize that the habit is not the answer but the symptom. It means daring to ask what truly causes my unrest. Plato described the painful process of leaving the cave. The eyes hurt when first exposed to light. Similarly, the psyche resists facing painful emotions. But only by enduring that discomfort can truth be seen. To stop biting nails may require enduring raw anxiety or sadness without escape. Yet beyond that pain lies freedom. Kierkegaard would interpret this through the lens of anxiety. Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. To live is to confront infinite possibilities. That openness terrifies us. We fear making the wrong choice. We fear responsibility. To escape, we retreat into rituals. Nail biting becomes one such escape. It reduces infinity to a small controllable act. But the escape never lasts. Anxiety returns. Kierkegaard insisted that true courage is not the absence of fear but the choice to face it. The person who learns to face their anxiety rather than chew it away takes the first step toward authentic existence. They begin to live not in avoidance but in responsibility. Nietzsche would frame the issue in terms of will to power. Every life form strives to expand, to grow, to overcome. But in nail biting, the will to power collapses inward. The energy meant for creation is spent on destruction. The person gnaws at their own weapons, their own boundaries. Yet Nietzsche also taught that every weakness can be transformed into strength. The one who recognizes their self-destructive cycle and chooses to redirect energy becomes stronger than one who never struggled. Nail biting can thus be a starting point. To overcome it is to prove that even the smallest weakness can be material for greatness. The victory is symbolic. It says, if I can overcome this compulsion, I can also face greater challenges. From the perspective of modern medicine and neuroscience, the message is similar. Nail biting trains the brain into compulsion. Each bite activates reward circuits, giving a momentary release. The brain learns the pattern. Over time it becomes automatic. The challenge is to retrain the brain. This requires not only breaking the cycle but also developing healthier ways of regulating stress. Breathing, meditation, physical activity, creative expression, and conversation all serve as alternatives. When these new habits are practiced consistently, the brain forms new pathways. Relief is no longer tied to destruction but to growth. In this sense, psychology and neuroscience converge with philosophy. They all point to the possibility of transformation. The cultural dimension must not be ignored. Nail biting thrives in a society that does not encourage emotional expression. We are taught to perform to achieve, to present flawless images. Vulnerability is hidden. Emotions are suppressed. The unconscious rebels. It finds expression through the body. Nail biting becomes a symptom of a culture of repression. Jung would call this the collective shadow. Just as individuals repress, so societies repress. The result is the same. The repressed returns disguised. To heal individually, we must face our shadows. To heal collectively, we must face the truths our culture denies. Perfectionism is another cultural factor. In a world of polished images, even the smallest flaw feels intolerable. The rough edge of a nail becomes a symbol of inner imperfection. Biting is an attempt to erase it. But imperfection never vanishes through destruction. It must be accepted. Nietzsche would remind us that the pursuit of perfection enslaves. Kierkegaard would call it despair. Jung would call it shadow. All point to the same truth. Liberation comes not from erasing flaws but from integrating them. To stop biting nails is to accept imperfection, to accept humanity itself. It is a small act but one that echoes with philosophical depth. What then is the path forward? First comes awareness. To notice the habit in the moment. To observe when the urge arises. To ask what emotion is present. Second comes interpretation. To see the habit not as shame but as message. To treat each bite as a signal from the unconscious. Third comes substitution. To learn healthier ways of release, breathing, writing, movement, dialogue. Fourth comes acceptance. To realize that imperfection is part of being human. To accept anxiety as the dizziness of freedom rather than fleeing it. Finally comes integration. To make conscious what was unconscious. To transform shadow into symbol. To walk the path of individuation. Consider a patient who has bitten nails since childhood. They enter therapy ashamed of the habit. They hide their hands in meetings. They try bitter polishes and gloves but nothing lasts. In therapy they begin to notice the urge arises when they feel judged. They recall childhood criticism from parents. They realize each bite repeats the message, you are not enough. Awareness grows. The therapist helps them see the habit as communication, not failure. They learn to breathe when the urge arises. They journal their feelings. They practice speaking openly about insecurity. Over months the habit fades. But more importantly, they feel stronger. They realize the bitten nail was never about the nail. It was about their relationship with themselves. By integrating that truth they take a step toward wholeness. This transformation mirrors the philosophical lessons. Plato teaches us to turn from shadows to light. Kierkegaard teaches us to face anxiety rather than flee. Nietzsche teaches us to transform weakness into strength. Jung teaches us to integrate the unconscious into consciousness. All these lessons converge in the small act of overcoming nail biting. The habit becomes a doorway to deeper existence. What seems trivial reveals the deepest truths. To stop biting nails is not only to save the hands. It is to choose freedom over avoidance. It is to choose integration over repression. It is to choose light over shadow. At the societal level the lesson is equally profound. A culture that represses emotion will always produce symptoms. The rising rates of anxiety, depression, and compulsive behaviors are not accidents. They are signs that the collective shadow is speaking. Just as the bitten nail is the individual symptom, so collective crises are the social symptom. Healing requires space for vulnerability, for dialogue, for acceptance of imperfection. Just as the individual must integrate their shadow, so society must integrate its denied truths. Without this integration, the cycle of self-destruction will continue. In the end, the question, why do you bite your nails, is no longer trivial. It becomes existential. It asks, how do you deal with your inner reality? Do you chew it away in silence, or do you face it in light? Do you remain chained in the cave, or do you turn toward truth? Do you waste your will to power on self-destruction, or do you redirect it toward creation? Do you flee anxiety or embrace it as the teacher of freedom? The answer determines not only the state of your hands but the state of your soul. Breaking the habit then is not merely physical discipline. It is a symbolic act of transformation. It declares, I will no longer chew my fears, I will speak them. I will no longer destroy my defenses, I will build strength. I will no longer flee shadows, I will face light. Jung would say that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Nail biting is one small piece of that fate. To make it conscious is to turn fate into freedom. To see it as message is to begin individuation. To overcome it is to take a step toward wholeness. Thus, the next time someone asks, why do you bite your nails, remember that the question is not about nails at all. It is about how you live with yourself. It is about whether you allow shadows to rule or whether you dare to face light. It is about whether you consume your fears or transform them into strength. the trivial gesture conceals the deepest drama of human existence. To recognize this is to see that even the smallest habit can be the beginning of profound change.